All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session of the Design Nuances Edu series. And I'm going to share my screen now and give you the purpose of this series. So, the objective of this particular series is to learn the nuance of a new topic specific to design, fashion, or architecture. You get to interact with experts from this field and absorb the knowledge that they have to share. And you also get introduced to a new school and understand the purpose or the philosophy of that school, right? So these are the three critical objectives of this. We have today's topic is what is the world that you will enter as a creative practitioner in 2029, right? I think it's a very interesting topic, very relevant to this upcoming group of students. And this is being done by Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bangalore. To introduce this topic, we have Professors Amitabh Kumar and Siddhi Gupta, who would delve into the insights of this. Now, in general, we do have an introductory slide where we introduce the faculty, but today is a little different format where they would bring the introduction in themselves. So I'd leave that to them and we can go into the next slide. Now, if you all are keen on applying to Srishti Manipal, there's an application link on DQH. This application link is going to be shared in on DQH. So please keep track of DQH, and I'm going to post it in the chat as well. And now we're going to hand it back to the team at Srishti Manipal. All right. So Siddhi and Amitabh, thank you so much for coming in today. So looking forward to what you'll have in store.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dion. We also have Mahesh with us. Mahesh, do you want to start off the proceedings and we will follow suit?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mahesh Bhatt, faculty member at Srishti. I'm going to be brief today, give a very brief introduction about Srishti. And then I, hand over the mic, so to speak, to Siddhi and Amitabh. Srishti is, one of India's best-known, finest art design schools. We started about 27 years ago with 6 students, and we are about 1,600 students now across undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD programs. And it's not just in India. Srishti is known across the world, and our alumni are spread all over. Of course, in every part of India, and also from in all the world cities, as alumni are working, and which we are very proud of. We are also pioneers in transdisciplinary mode of learning, learning of art design, and the technologies. We assimilate technology in our courses. That's what technology stands for. We are now a constituent unit of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, and we're located in the brand new campus, Mahe, Bengaluru, near Yelahanka. So that's about it. Briefly, now over to Siddhi and Amitabh. Over to you guys.
Hello, my name is Amitabh, and I'm with Siddhi Gupta. We run the creative education program, and before we really delve deep into the meat of the discussion, I think it's always good to set the context. So I think it's great if we go back to the start, go back to a certain moment when we try and explore how did design education and design learning come into our consciousness and coming to being itself. Sorry, it was just a small hiccup while I was trying to share my screen. So I think before we really get into what is Srishti, I think it's important to understand, where did design education, art education begin? Where did that story begin? And what were the reasons for design institutions of higher learning to be established? What were the motivations? And have those motivations really changed? And then I think we will move into trying to understand what is the moment that we occupy right now. So having said that, I think it's to understand this, it's really to understand a century between two great exhibitions. If you allow me to elaborate, the first exhibition is the Great Exhibition of 1851. This happened in London, where our colonizers took a lot of craft and a lot of art products to back home, and had a grand exhibition. This exhibition was a massive success in terms of the public curiosity, and the desire to procure these objects was created. This led to an interest in creating a factory of sorts for our colonizers, and an interest within the craft, product, and commercial aspects of what uh, traditionally rooted creative practices could sort of mean within a certain market ecosystem. Um, at the same time, this was 1851. Immediately after that comes the revolt of 1857, and Mr. Thomas Babington Macaulay becomes a very, very important figure, because after the revolt, uh, there needs to be new tools of subjugation that need to be invented, and education, my friends, is deemed to be one of those tools, where the idea of education is to extend the empire's vision and extend the empire's propaganda. And it's important because Macaulay's minutes play a fundamental role in establishing the post-industrial, post-enlightenment structured modern education paradigm that we currently exist in. Uh, it was it's very telling then that when in the 1870s and 1880s, the first design institutions were formed. They were industrial design institutions. And there's a wonderful quote here which really highlights what were the key aspects or the key imaginations around which these education institutes were formed. Uh, so I quote, it was inevitable that the emergence of formalized art education in India was grounded in the philosophy of the South Kensington Circle, with a dual purpose of preserving India's dying crafts and improving the quality of manufactured goods for the British through the imposition of British methods of instructions. These methods of instructions were largely technical, were largely hinged on the learner's ability to reproduce, and I think were the first formation of a word that we'll hear very often in this conversation, at least, skill. Uh, Further to the establishment of uh, the colonial models of industrial design education, which then, I mean, one of them is JJ in Bombay, which continues to flourish as a major center for technical arts and crafts and skill. One was the Calcutta Art School. They opened one in Chennai, and they opened in Lahore. This was the colonial model that was imposed, if one might use a word. However, immediately post-independence, which is the next great exhibition, uh, was the Great Exhibition of 1951. MoMA held a massive exhibition of furniture and products, uh, which attracted not just popular attention, but national attention in terms of how do we see the creative crafts and existing practices become contemporary and global, seeking a certain form of the modern. And it was this moment that really led to uh, a pace around advocacy for institutions of higher learning, which led to the famous designers Charles and Ray Eames to be commissioned by the government of India to travel across the country and write what is known as the India Report. Popularly, it's known as the Eames Report, and we at Srishti and at the creative education program really want, I mean, it'll be great if this document gets more public discourse because it talks about the lota and the craft and the form and the ergonomics of the lota as an example of how culturally rooted design practices or creative practices can be thought through. That report led to the formation of NIID, National Institute of Industrial Design, which then later became NID. Just to clarify from this section that the three main drivers of what we understand as institutional models of higher creative learning were product, was commerce, and was propaganda. So we continue to have, I mean, have you ever stopped and questioned how departments are formed, how programs are formed, how you have certain streams of learning, who shapes these streams of learning? On that note, I feel I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Siddhi, which will time travel us back to the present and tell us a little bit about what's happening right now. Siddhi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Amitabh, for setting the stage. And I think ending with that question of if we even question why are certain departments called what they are called, why am I joining a certain school? Why is it called design and why is that called architecture? So are we asking these questions? And I think, Amitabh, will you manage the slides? Will you go to the next? Will you take us to the slide? And I think I'm also going to ask another question before I begin is this, what is creative economy and why are we asking this question? You'll be surprised, but this is not a very new word. We are looking at a word which is actually not more than 30 years old. And I think Amitabh spoke about institutionalizing a creative practice, institutionalizing design, and saying here we can now learn it at an institution. What we want to talk about now is what is the world that you will enter after you've gone through that institution? What system do you become a part of? And I think in this phrase, which is creative economy is still easier to understand. We're talking about economics, we're talking about money, we're talking about wealth, we're talking about value that it brings to, again, an institution. If nation was an institution, if the world is an institution, and all of these words and these systems are institutionalized, creative becomes still more tricky to explain what it is and what it is not. Creative economy is a recent word where countries have started to look at what value does creativity add to our GDP, how the way we work and how we do things. And that's what creative economy is. What we also want to talk about later and right now is how tricky it is to define it. How tricky it is to define what creative economy is. Where does it start? Where does it end? How do we start calculating this value that this brings to our nation? So different countries have had different routes. Some take the arts and culture route, whereas some take food and gastronomy and say they bring cultural value and significance to our country. So which is why we will call them as creative economy. Or some other countries have still taken a more business to business route, which is publishing or direction or video games or movies become part of the creative economy. So we've had a really tough time to actually create a watertight outline to say this is what creative economy is. And because it is so difficult to understand what it is, countries have also struggled to say whether it becomes a part of the economic policy or industrial policy or cultural policy or education policy or all four. And I mean, the audience that we're talking to, I think it's a great question to ask because right now you stand at the cusp of all of these, whether you're joining an educational institution where you will get a degree or you will study design most probably. But what is the education policy that guides that institution? What is the cultural policy that guides that institution? What is the industrial policy and economic policy? We're all going to be paying to get this education. So what is it? How is it being run? So when, next slide, please. So as we are trying to define what it means, here are some spaces that were mapped immediately as to bringing creative value to the economy. And I mean, if you go through the slide, you'll be able to see some very familiar possible areas of work that you also want to get into once you finish your education, whether it's performing arts or film or TV and radio and graphic design. And they said, could we map the value that these areas bring to our growth and call that the creative economy? But then they again struggle, but because what about areas like healthcare and mobility and road construction where design is again applied? How do we then start talking about creative economy if the scope of creative practice and its impact is so large? you also we have to realize that when we talk about economy, we're talking about intellectual value, property. We are saying anything new, anything original is what has value, whereas others may not. Again, very, very debatable. Should we anchor creative economy to this definition of intellectual property? And so countries were struggling. We are still struggling how to define what creative economy means. As it progressed, on the next slide, we see that they said, okay, we have mapped some areas, we have seen some impact that we make when we do creative practice, or when we have a creative flourishing practice in our country. They also realized it was about building a identity for ourselves. When we are investing and being distinct from another place is also a value that creativity brings to our country and our economy, and hence we also need to address it. And I have very partially put the Taj Mahal as the largest photo on this slide. Again, so it every time they went back to the definition, they kept expanding it. And I also want to note, link this to what Amitabh said about the Great India Exhibition. The identity of a country, the identity of creativity is linked to where we are at, is linked to a geography, which was acknowledged. But as soon as we start linking it to economy and the value we are bringing, it again gets convoluted. Next slide. As this definition keeps expanding, countries have realized that it is not just about what we do as creative practitioners, whether we are into advertising, whether we are filmmaking, whether we are into architecture, but it is also how this sector is organized, which is largely small and medium-sized industries. How do we do business? How do we organize ourselves? How do we make work happen that may also lay the future for how the world is going to work? So it is not just by doing and making, but also how we do it that could bring the value to an economy. And finally, closing with this statement from a report from British Council, where they say that as oil was the fuel of the 20th century economy, it is going to be creativity in the 20th century that's going to fuel it. Looking at how rapidly the world is changing, how rapidly technology is changing, and how rapidly everything that we have to do is changing, it may be the creativity may be the center which can still hold its ground, which may still be somewhat immune to these changes, with the caveat that we define creativity well, that we define what being creative means well. Yeah, and with that, I throw the ball back at Amitabh. Mute.
Sorry. No, it's really funny. I was really wondering that when was the last time that we heard, or in which era that we heard that entire national economies were being supported by a pop star concert, or it's a little crazy when you think about it like that, where creative practices are playing such a rapid role. Or when was the last time you went to a movie theater? We are seeing industries and ecologies transform around us, and it's of course one part of it is the economy that is fueling it, but we also must be cognizant that we are part of a rapidly changing world, and which is not just the market. It's also the ecology. It's also the aspects of global politics. It's also finite resources. I mean, I think the scariest part about the pandemic was how unprepared we were for it. And therefore, the question you need to ask yourself is that, what's next? In as much as I don't think that the pandemic really impacted change once. I think it has set us off on a cycle of change where we are constantly evolving, and which is why it's very difficult for us to frame or freeze an idea of the creative economy, because it's constantly evolving with newer and newer profiles, with newer demands, with newer roles. And I do feel we are also at a moment where we are very cognizant of design playing a role, or creativity playing a role within the larger socio-ecological order. Uh, and these forces really require you to start understanding who is or what is this persona that is relevant to the new world? Because it is a new world. How do we need to look at practice? Do we need to look at it through the form of industrial specialization that brackets you as a singular, hyper specialized sort of a creative being? Or are we really talking about the polyglot right now? Are we really talking about a figure who is who is in 4 or 5 different economic chambers? The point is that with the creative economy emerging and further growing, industries that were earlier watertight have actually mutated and have created hybrid forms, uh, where which needs a certain hybridization. It needs a certain diversity within the creative persona. So I'm just going to read out certain personas to you, and I'll tell you why. Uh, like for example, an illustrator, a cartoonist, a filmmaker, and an environmentalist, a printmaker, architect, and a publication designer, a sculptor, a community radio campaigner, and a curator, a photographer, an activist, a writer, an artist leading the admission programs in Srishti. You met him earlier, Mahesh Bhatt, an entrepreneur, a printmaker, a set designer, a curator, and an artist. These are all profiles of our colleagues at Srishti, who are, I mean, who like us embody a certain moment in time and practices that are necessary, that moment sort of necessitates. So yeah, I think it's a good time to introduce ourselves. My name is Amitabh. I draw. I'm a visual artist. I curate. I produce events. I publish books. With Siddhi, we've also been running government schools in Delhi where we write curriculum, and we lead the creative education program at Srishti, and we are educators as well. Siddhi, do you want to tell them a little bit about
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, hi, I am Siddhi. And I mean, I'll start with Educator since that's already revealed. But I teach at Srishti, but I'm also a visual communications designer. I'm a design researcher. I also design games. I do workshops. Yeah, that's me. And I'm very happy to be talking to you all today.
Yeah, I mean, I just before we move on to our next section, I just wanted to. I think I'll stop sharing. Feel it's important that we talk directly. Uh, I it's a so I first came to Srishti in 2011, and I took a comics class, and I met a student there, and soon enough the student followed me and did his internship under me. And I come from a visual arts background, and where you're trained to be a singularity, a painter or a sculptor. You cannot definitely be both. How could you? But this boy wanted to be a carpenter, wanted to make comics, make films, wanted to build homes, wants to travel the world and do a podcast about it back in 2013. And the scary thing was that he actually did all of it. This is a Srishti alumni. And yeah, Siddhi, do you want to tell us a little bit about Srishti, about our space and our pedagogy, and how we move ahead?
Yeah, for sure. And also why we are having this conversation today. I mean, we could have spoken about anything else, but I think as educators and as those invested in creative education, I think we look at it as a larger ecosystem within which I think what we are saying is that as to be designers and as to be creative practitioners, what should your asks from an institution be? What should you be seeking in this education? And I think in our intention to paint this picture of creative economy, it is to say that the world is changing. Creative economy exists. People are looking at the value that we create as creative practitioners and the value we bring to the world, to our communities. How do you prepare yourself to be bringing this value when this world or the community you're responding to constantly changing? So I think what we want to talk about is how do we approach education? How do we approach this creative education? And I think one way is to be constantly reading about the future, to constantly be looking ahead and saying whatever we're doing in the classroom today may be applied 4 years from now or 10 years from now. So how do we prepare our learner for it? What we're saying is that instead of responding to industry, which may be a certain way today, how can we create it How can our graduates, how can what we do in the classroom be the creation of this sectors, or these, this merging of these new figures that's happening, and that creative economy allows for. And that creative practice is not one thing. I think at Srishti, every learner has its own trajectory. You may be choosing one particular program when you enter, but no two people have studied the same curriculum. And I think that in some ways preparing you for change, that in some ways already building a skill set for you to be adaptable to not just new kinds of learning and to be receptive to new kinds of learning, but to be able to apply it as well. I think the other thing which you're very, very cognizant of is that an institution, as we have said from the very first slide, is not existing in isolation. Your design education, your creative education should not be inside four walls. It should be about the real world. You should be stepping out. You should be going far and wide and coming back to this common space or to this home, which is your institution, to be reflecting on it. So to constantly be in engagement with the real world. And I think one other very important thing that Amitabh and we keep talking about at creative education is also leadership, is that we no longer have the choice to not be leaders. I think if you have to create your own trajectory, if you have to be the shapers, you have to lead. And how do you do that? You do that by being constantly aware of what is happening around you, to allow yourself to be receptive around it, to be agile, adaptable, and to be a lifelong learner. And what we're saying is that let this be the demands that you have when you enter your education, when you enter an institution, and say, prepare me for this, prepare me for these roles that may not even exist right now. So how do you first envision these roles? How do you first know what it is that will be of value, that will make you an active contributor to the creative economy, to take this, I think, to take the economy forward? And how do you prepare yourself for it? So be more active agents than be something that is defined by your institution. So that's what we hope is the takeaway from this conversation of painting this picture of the past and the future, to say that a lot of people have played a lot of roles in getting us here, but now you are the drivers. So take control.
Yeah, and learn
And
as
learn.
only you can, because I mean, now's the time to really look at learning as a core transferable skill. And at Srishti, because the entire curriculum is choice based and has always been choice based, and we believe in this in the concept of the living curriculum. I mean, the it's 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 all churning and boiling at the same time. There is no stability in a way that allows you to settle, and it is in this unsettled constant movement where you're extending yourself and trying to understand uh, who you really are, not in the singularity. I mean, the institution is run by its learners, and the multiple ways that they are trying to push themselves. So it's not a single curriculum. It's, as Mahesh said, it's 1,200 different curriculums that each student embodies, and there's a merit to that, because the the moment of time that we occupy and the space that we are headed, learning is at the core of it. Right down from machine learning to AI, to the way technologies are changing, to the role of, or the very definition of human agency, um, and what that means in an emerging ecological, economic, sort of social scenario. These aspects are going to be putting us in more and more unfamiliar territories. But as a learner would be aware of, unfamiliarity is just the beginning. And to approach the coming future, the unfamiliar future, with the curiosity of a learner, is something that Srishti prepares you for. And yeah, we are also having our pre-thesis exhibition on the 13th and 14th, where a large group of learners will be staking claim to their identity for the first time. And we really like to invite you for the exhibition. Meet us, meet our young community, and take forth. I mean, let's collectively try and understand what this future is and where the future is at. Uh, yeah. So that's our time, I think, Dion.
All right, all right. I think excellent perspective. Um, very different thought process that we see at Srishti, right? Because the future is very unpredictable and it's evolving, and no one has a clue where it's going to evolve to in the next few years, isn't it? All we know is that there is going to be change, and we need to adapt to that change at some level or the other. Um, right. So we have Arva here. Arva is one of our former students who's now a student of design, and she may pitch in with some questions as well. But there is a report on the creative economy called the Orange Economy, right? Very relevant to show the real scale and the diversity of what's to come. Of course, it's a slightly older report, but a very interesting report that talks about uh, a lot about relevant stuff what you all spoke about. Are you all familiar with that report, Jenny? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, all right, all right. So we see that the orange economy is the creative economy, and there is huge scale and volume of what is expected there. Um, when it comes to the students really creating an impact, right, in the future, now we're seeing trends where designers are picking up very niche areas. For example, there's this girl called Alicia Souza, right? Who's I think she's a graduate of Srishti herself.
No.
Or she's
She's a
not.
friend. She's a friend of the institution. She's been very generous with her time with our learners. But no, she's not a Srishti graduate.
Okay, okay, yeah, but she's created an absolutely unique niche for herself, right? In terms and for the benefit of the audience, um, Alicia Souza is a designer, content creator. She's got her own product range. She's a mother. She's so many things in one, and an influencer most of all. Um, and she's created a niche for herself for a relevant, I mean, for this day and age. And it's not related to any stream of design, isn't it? It's not product design, it's not communication, it's a whole mix of everything, right? Where would you categorize her in terms of what you're talking about?
I'll tell you something. I think design and the creative practices are. I mean, what we are trying to do at Srishti is really to push outwards. I don't think it's the opposite of being a monk in a monastery, where you are in a creatively affirming ecosystem where your practice will be, celebrated. Uh, I'll just like one clear example is one of our recent graduates. He's a product design student who made a podcast for his graduation project where he was interested in the creative economy, and he was speaking to people like award-winning bartenders and fashion designers and gallerists and the whole lot. It's been 9 months that he's graduated. He's a venture capitalist now, who is investing in startups in the entire startup ecosystem. He's working out of Bombay. He retains his own job while setting up his own company. And the range of projects that he's working on is trying to solve. I mean, since he's based out of Bombay, is the grey water menace in Bombay with sewage disposal, to creating silent auctions for artists, so that equitable systems can be generated, uh, to sort of creating his own, I mean, and holding a job while at the same time. Uh, and he calls his venture capitalist practice as a design practice. Our vision is to have more and more learners come out from our ecosystem that are part of these very, very, very different, strange new worlds, where we don't think that design is should necessarily be a discipline. I think it should be the core or the DNA of all other disciplines, and support a range of practices if given the opportunity. So I mean, in that sense, we sound a little bit like creative evangelists because perhaps we are creative evangelists ourselves, where we are, and by saying that, we are not neglecting traditional sides of creative practice, such as the slide on the creative economy offered. But there is excitement to be working in the finance sector. There is excitement to be working in the legal sector. There is excitement to be working in grassroots campaigning. There is, I mean, we are also, like Srishti is also one of the major drivers for the World Design Protopolis program, which asks a simple question: what can design do for the city? And the advocacy has reached to a stage where the municipal council in Bangalore has approved a tentative the role of design in improving both systems and services that the city municipal council has to offer. So for us, I think we think creativity plus, where Alicia is a great example, and she's incredible, and she's a role model for a lot of our students. Uh, but yeah, I feel there are other very, very interesting young people who are doing really, really cool things. Not all of us, not all of them need to be from Srishti, but it's a really, really exciting time to be a creator.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Amitabh. Arwa, do you have a question for the team?
Yes, sir. Okay, so Siddhi ma'am mentioned about how the geography also plays an important role in the creativity of a place. So I was just wondering that how do you think that design education in India is different from elsewhere, and how does India's culture affect design?
Thank you for that question, Arva. But I maybe as I talk about it, I will also reframe is I wished design education in India was different. Because the roots that Amitabh has spoken about when we started talking is that we inherited design from somebody else, which was not homegrown, and hence it was very difficult for us to come up with our own. But I think how it is very different is that it's not only different. I don't think India is one singular unit when it comes to design education. I think we have many different ways of approaching design depending on the institution you go to and the place where it is at. And I think that's to do with design philosophy. It's to do with the philosophy relating to what role creativity plays or what are we preparing our students for. So, I mean, we can talk very, very confidently about what Srishti does, which is this idea of doing creativity plus, which is the idea of doing more than what you've done. But both Amitabh and I have had education ourselves in very different institutions within India. And our education has been very different because the philosophy of the institution was very different. I mean, I studied at NIF Delhi and I did communication design at NIF Delhi, which is primarily a fashion institution. So even my communication design course was called fashion communication. Whereas over the years, we had evolved. As you would know, and you are more in touch with what NIFT is doing now, it became a larger communication design course. But we were still created for the fashion economy. That communication design was incepted or was thought of that the fashion industry will eventually need people who can communicate what we do. The very, very important designers will need somebody who can communicate it. So I don't think it is just geography led. I think in India, and then there are other institutions like Somaya Kala Vidyalaya, which is also again a design institution, but they're looking at a very different segment of population and a philosophy that they are catering to. So there are many different ways in which it is being approached. There's a larger sentiment to be maybe contributing to the distinctiveness of where we are at within India, within our culture, that may be at play. But I think it is more to do with the philosophy of the institution. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it depends on what you learn and how you learn it. Yes. Also, I was very curious about what advice you would have to people who are stepping into this field, into a very creative field, and what do you think that they should go ahead and do?
They should go ahead and pursue it.
Like, what would be their first stepping stone?
What I
Yeah.
missed, what would be there first?
And no, like how do they go about it? Like if they are interested in something, how do they find their niche? Is what advice do you have for them?
Okay, I will start, but then I will ask Amitabh and Mahesh to jump in as well to answer this question. I mean, I have just come back home today after a conversation with a final year student who's just finished their pre-thesis project and done something very, very new for the first time in their lives, which is create an interactive website to explain how power works in tech, right? Who are the different players? What role do they play? And how do you create that experience digitally? And the conversation we were having is that maybe I did not present this idea very well, and what do I do? What do I do about it? And where do I seek? Where is that? If I couldn't present well, why couldn't I do it? Why couldn't I do it? Because I was seeking validation and I was hoping to get a very good response from the people I was presenting to. And the conversation was that your creative practice that you establish for yourself will constantly be making choices in terms of when to take risks, when to not take risks, when to do something new, or when to stick to what you've already known. So I think advice would vary at which stage they're at. I think the first advice would, of course, be that if you are aligned, go ahead, pursue it. I think creativity or a creative practice is very rewarding in many, many ways. I think the other advice would be, which we are, I mean, I think Amitabh and I at least have had a lot of experience with so far, is to collaborate. Right. I mean, if you're at GQ Labs and you're already working together, maybe start building those connections and relationships there itself as you build your creative practice. And I think is lastly, be very, very conscious of what it means to you and to people around you, to know that you exist in a world, in a community, and that it's your practice is in relationship with that community and group. Yeah, over to Amitabh and Mahesh.
It's a one-liner actually from me. I think it's just make the path you take. I think you the learner who's entering this space should be prepared to be in spaces that have been uncharted. It's a very, very exciting space. The creative practices. It's not just retinal. It's not just creating a beautiful artifact. It has a role to play, both art and design practices. Design has always been imbued with functional dispositions, and art has been, or what do they say, marginalized to the expressive. But at Srishti, we believe in an amalgamation of all three: art, design, and technology. And we don't see we see the creative process as having aspects of all three, and that will always take you to spaces that haven't been been chartered, haven't been done. But at the same time, I think there is a role that we play in shaping the world, and you need to take power over it. My son is 11, and he said something really, really wise. He said that cow doesn't give us milk, we take it. So I feel it is a proactive action where you take ownership of your learning, you take ownership of your relationship with the world, and you break new ground, and you continue moving, because the world at large needs it. It's a matter of survival, not of vanity or any heroism.
Yeah, I think just to add, it's a wish list, or a wish. It's a wish, not a wish list, but is that maybe what if design education in India is only in English? So it would be phenomenal, I think, if we have design education design and art in our languages, different languages, Kannada to Tamil to Gujarati or whatever. So it this idea was actually, it's not mine. One of our colleagues, Janak Mistry, who is a fine design thinker, a great mind. I mean, it came up in a conversation. He asked this question to me, saying that why not, and that would be, I think, would be really great in India. However, having said that, we have had students at Srishti, taking off from the idea of charting your own path, who have graduated from Srishti who were not very good in English. There's two people I can remember. One of them was strong. His mother tongue is Marathi. So all his submissions were in Hindi. So he has actually made a book in Hindi, a photo book in my class. He did his master's at Srishti. and he's a professor, assistant professor in another school now. And people have been who know only Kannada, have graduated with BFA degrees here. So that's it. We have fostered that open culture where people can do what they are comfortable. So the freedom, to do things. Yeah. So it's a bit of a tangential answer, but I guess sharing a thought actually.
All right. Very, very, very interesting perspective and good question, Arwa. Very thought-provoking. Chetan Sai Ved is asking, what's the designer's impact towards the world from 2029 onwards, right? Very a question that's open to interpretation, but maybe your thoughts on that.
I mean, you could take it backwards also, but I think we'll play it straight. It's a straightforward question. We won't create a maze where this question will get lost. Uh, I, I do feel that design has a lot to offer. I mean, design has had its journey, right? It was product, then service, then systems, and now we are at the age of computational design. This I learned from a student of mine. And given the fact that we are moving into a more and more streamlined, a more and more hybrid world, where digital experiences such as taking a plane, or boarding, where we are getting more and more dematerialized. I think design has a responsibility towards sensitizing the direction that we are taking, and what those value systems really are. I used to ball a little bit when I was younger, and I think someone said that being a fast bowler doesn't mean that you always ball at that speed. I think it comes down to modulation and moderation, and I do think the world doesn't need anything more. I think it needs a little less of a lot of what we have, and I think design systems play a huge role in 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 helping us, in saving us from ourselves, actually. So, Siddhi, Mahesh.
Just, I mean, not, I think you summed it up, but I also think the impact that design will make, I think is, I think hugely to also curate. I think more and more we're getting into a stage where, I mean, and also with the newer tools, and maybe in some ways I'm also getting into the next question, which Dion has already put on the chat. But I think the role of curation and to be able to curate well for a particular audience, maybe the role that design will also play is to understand what these people exactly need, or what this group of people, the what do they need, and customize it and curate it for them. I think may also be the role that design will play to create an impact, to be able to see through the excess that we will have.
Yeah, to add to that, it's a great question. I think I'm really loving the questions that are coming up. I think, designers are the new world makers. They're going to make new worlds. That is, I came across the writings of this great scholar called Arturo Escobar. He is just retired as a senior professor at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's in his book that he proposed that the world is enough of stuff, enough of things. So designers have to now make new worlds, not change the world, make new worlds. So I think the designers 29 onwards, designers need to do that. That's what's going to happen. And I'm glad to say that several of our students are already on their way of, they are going to be new world makers, and they're graduated, and some of us, we are watching them very closely, and we are still interacting, on a very frequent basis, and helping each other. There's a lot to learn from them, and they're really going to make new world. That's what designers are going to be doing from 29 around that time. Yeah. Yeah, that's from me.
Okay, so we have Smita Adarsh who is asking just like how we have IT enabled services, design will also become a tool and it will become an enabled service in various domains and industries. What are your thoughts about that?
It's this horror slogan that we used to hear that used to really give us the creeps. And it sounds we often we've been hearing that design is the new engineering. I think it's a it's an economic catchphrase. Um, n- it doesn't bode well if and it's an outdated way of approaching design actually if you're just looking at it as product or service. Design has evolved from being products. I mean, a better part of like 50, 60 years ago. And I feel that the fact that it is getting public consciousness as a practice, and it is getting interest as a practice. Uh, if you want proof, just Google how many design schools in Bangalore. The number will really, really interest you. So yeah, when you look at those numbers and you look at a certain public imagination of what design is, it seems like a toy that can like a plug and play option. But we at Srishti don't don't ascribe to either that form of practice, not in our faculty community, neither in our students. I think, like Siddhi mentioned, it's more about design philosophy and the worlds that you can create through design. Mahesh also mentioned that, earlier, that we are it's a it's a world creating vision, not a plastic toy to sort of add to your like that comes in that egg chocolate thingy. So yeah.
Yep. Just to add, I think just to add to this, I think it's also it's a more acceptance question than it being a value add. I think it is not to say that the service becomes better, but it is how recognized, how do we start relating with the word design? I mean, China recently came up with a policy where instead of made in China, they want some of their products to come out with designed in China. And what does that mean? So what does it mean to position design? Uh, yeah, I think it's a question. So I think it is different from an institutional point of view where we are learning design from a selling point of view where it becomes a trope almost.
So yeah, just to build up on this, I think like you all said, it's all about the philosophy, right? If you approach design from a philosophy that, okay, I'm going to make products or services, or this is the kind of problem I'm going to solve, then it's very transactional, right? But if we look at it as, okay, these are the problems being faced by people, and then really see how we can improve the world, then it's a completely different approach, right? And that's where the niche comes in. That's where the philosophy comes in from Srishti, because you're saying, okay, let's figure out how to make the world a better place, right? And that not necessarily even mean design, it may be technology, right? And you bring up a good point by saying, okay, designed in China, and there are things like the UPI was designed in India and is now going abroad, right? It's going global. It's a phenomenal change, and looks like this. It looks like India is really setting itself for a global future, right? Changing global trends. It's amazing to see what's happening here. Arma, do you have a last question before we?
But just to add, you talked about UPI. We one of our alumni is in GPay design team. He works out of New York, Google office. Yeah, and yeah,
That's phenomenal.
yeah.
Yeah. And incidentally, the way GPay and all these apps have been accepted in India is not the same as it's accepted in America or in a lot of other countries, right? India is very far advanced on that front. Yeah. Arwa, go ahead. You had another question.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask what is a book or movie that you would recommend students should read or watch? That completely changes the perspective on things.
The India report, go read it. It's really short and important. But Amitabh, yeah, Taman Mahesh.
Difficult read, Designs for the Pluriverse, Radical Interdependence, Autonomy and Making of the Worlds by Arturo Escobar. It's not an easy read. It took me a year to read it, and changed my perspective completely. So much so that when I was visiting US, I traveled all the way to North Carolina from New York just to meet him for half an hour, and I was fortunate to meet him. Yeah, it's an amazing, it's life-changing book. Yeah.
For me, it's like one of my mentors gifted it to me. I had read it earlier, but then you reread it, and so there are two actually. One is Tools of Conviviality by Ivan Illich. I think it's a essential read. Anybody who's getting into the design spectrum with the valid ambition to sort of profit and to become commercially successful needs to read that book. Because I think you'll understand that you can be a commercially successful designer, but also a deeply ethical, a deeply value-oriented, and a planet-positive person. So Ivan Illich, Tools of Conviviality, and more recently I've been looking at this other author called Jacques Rancière. He wrote this book called Knights of Labor, which I think it's absolutely important because, I mean, for me personally, because I think it talks about creativity as a certain social necessity. It doesn't separate creativity or sort of debase it as hobby. So right now you have a spectrum of either you are a professional or you're a hobbyist, and those are defined by your commercial sort of interests. But Rancière really turns it on its head, where he looks at creativity as the core of, as our spiritual core, and as a core of the working class community more so. So yeah, these two books.
Yeah, thank you. I will
Oh.
definitely check them out.
All right, and probably add the orange economy to that. My suggestion. All right, right. So, Mahesh, what we've discussed today, right, just to kind of put things into perspective, is a very, very different approach, right? You really spoke about the creative economy and what it takes to what it takes to really be part of that and really create things for the future. What does that mean for students of Srishti, right? Like you said, they have, every student will graduate with a different specialization, right? And something unique. Is that overwhelming? Is it confusing to a lot of people? Because it seems very vague and confusing, right? Is there a way to kind of simplify that and help people understand why that's important?
Yeah, good, very good question, Dan. What we have seen is when a student, a learner, is just finished their 12th and they're trying to find out what to do, and especially people who are very clear that they don't want to tread the beaten path, they don't want to get into engineering or medicine or other areas, but they know that they're interested in art or the artistic side of things. And Srishti, the interesting thing is, though it may seem vague, but it allows experimentation. Yeah, it allows people to traverse different areas, different worlds. Yeah, and kind of find what they're interested in, maybe one area or 4 areas when they graduate. Yeah, but that is freedom. When I ask my students, why are you here at Srishti? They say, because of the freedom. Yeah. I mean, they would have seen people walking at the background, and there's a lot of work going on at Srishti right now at the interim. The communication team is working out of my studio. They've been walking up and down. We are not going to tell, hey, don't go, I'm on a webinar, they're free to do their things, right? That's a studio culture, right? You're open, you do your work. So the ability to traverse different areas is very interesting. That's what is interesting. Also, we have a BWalk program. There's a 3-year degree program, which is, we also know that there are learners who are very focused. And they say, I want to learn film, only that, maybe after a few years, I'll learn other things. The BWalk program helps those kind of learners. So Srishti kind of is an institute for different kinds of learners who can be themselves and learn and grow.
Absolutely. You know what? This reminds me when I spoke with Sean and Umesh about their time when they were doing they were doing industrial design, by the way, at IIT Delhi. And when I asked them what was one of their favorite subjects, they said it was film and philosophy, right? Nothing to do with industrial design, right? But it was amazing, and it's great to have. And I'm sure this is common amongst all students, right? Because while they may have certain core interests, they would still want to explore a little more beyond that, and have the freedom and the flexibility to do that. And with that, I think it's a great place to be, and a great webinar that we've done today. We've had super conversations.
Yeah.
A very different perspective has opened up as to what we need to be prepared for as designers in 2029 and beyond. And for that, to introduce this concept to us and relate it to each one of us and the future aspirants. Thank you so much, Siddhi. Thank you so much, Amitabh and Mahesh.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you all here. And Arva, thank you so much for being here as well. I'm really looking forward to more interactions with you all. All right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Arva.
Thank you, Dion. Thanks, Arva.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.